funding is moving through the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. We've already worked with our Kentucky Department of Education and identified all of that funding has been at least allocated. Of course, we're waiting on school buses to arrive and verification of scrappage of the old buses. We have about $300,000 left in the school bus funding. Transit funding is fully allocated. And our last phase is to work on the DC Fast Charge and our partnerships with tourism and Kentucky Community Technical College System on level 2. There is a possibility we would then extend that into local governments and work with local governments. But again, we have that 50% match that we must adhere to due to our legislature. And there were also some restrictions on the transit funding that we had to adhere to, but we were able to leverage that to maximize that transit funding as well. We did allow cleaner diesels in our school buses and also in our transit funding. We did not limit any options as it applies to the cleaner options available under the Volkswagen settlement. But we're excited about our ZEV funding and what it can do to Kentucky, similar to Indiana, how we can build out our corridors and really start signaling that ZEV is essential for our economic development, our tourism and mobility in Kentucky. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm kenya.stump@ky.gov. I will say our VW expert at this time is Lona Brewer. She's Brewer, and that's BREWER. Lona is heading up our VW program and working on all of our contracts and forms that we must submit to the trustee. We're happy to partner and work with our other states, not just in the Southeast. So really appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you all today and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Kenya. We did have a couple of questions that popped up here in the chat, and I can read those real quickly.
Sure.
First one was from Will Weber. When does the VW settlement application go live for communities to apply for funding of charging stations?
We've already, well, that's the thing. Communities, we're not opening up an application for communities yet. We're working with, on level 2, we're working with our Kentucky Community Technical College and our state parks at the moment on level 2. As we see how that funding evolves, there is a possibility we would open up applications for communities.
And the second one said, and this said, when you say Southeast, are you referring to the Commonwealth of Southeast or to our fellow Southeastern states?
It's a collective of Southeastern states. So we're working with all of the state energy offices in the Southeastern states on a regional electric vehicle information exchange network. Currently, we're prioritizing best practices and mapping so that we can ensure we have that connectivity within the Southeast. Let's see, yeah, so that's what we're working on right now with the Southeast. I had a thought, it comes and goes on these Zoom meetings. It comes fast and it leaves just as fast. Yeah, we're very excited about the Southeast Regional Electric Vehicle Information Exchange and what it can bring. I know what I was going to say now. See, it always comes back around if you talk long enough. One thing about our Volkswagen funding, we've been a little, I guess you say, late to the gate or a little bit late to the start due to our legislature getting involved in our process. I think that's turning out to be a little bit of a silver lining in that we're learning from other states. We've learned from other states and sort of as they've pushed out money, where they've run into hurdles, where there have been a little bit of obstacles and some other best practices as it turns out. So right now we're optimistic. We haven't really run into a hurdle yet, but we do think the DC Fast Charge will be something that could present some challenges, as some other states have said, getting that statewide connectivity. And then how we place that squarely within economic development.
Great, thank you, Kenya. Appreciate your time today. Our next speaker is Loudon Loudon. Loudon is the Assistant Chief of Ohio EPA's Office of Environmental Education. His office oversees Ohio's $75 million in funds from the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust, a $5 million alternative fuel vehicle conversion program, and joint administration with the Ohio Department of Transportation of $10 million annually through Ohio's Diesel Emission Reduction Grant Program, or DERG. Loudon has been with the Ohio EPA since 2002 and with OEE since 2018. Prior to that, he worked for Kentucky Department of Environmental Protection. Welcome, Loudon.
Thank you so much. And thank you, David. Thank you, OKI, for hosting. And hello, everybody. Hello, Kenya. I want to say, as David just mentioned, I would have checked out a complete segment of my talk here in terms of introducing ourselves. So thank you for that really good introduction, David. I did work for the state of Kentucky for 7 years, including a year in KYDEAQ with Lorna Brewer. So fond memories, great people, and it's sort of great to connect as well. Thank you all. Please don't mind the Future City background. It's a competition that I help administer in here in Ohio region. And until I turned on my camera, I did not realize that that's what's going to show up in the background. But for those of you that have middle schoolers in Ohio, it's a national competition. I run the state competition. Our winner goes to Washington, D.C. to compete. And if your school wins, then they go to Space Camp for 1 week, which is super cool. So with that plug for Future City, unintended, unplanned, but here we are. Since we last met, I thought I'd give you all a quick update about who, I'm going to skip the who we are part now that David did such a good job with that introduction. But where we've been since we last talked and where we're headed. And then I'm happy to answer as many questions as you may have. So again, just real quickly, Ohio EPA, OEE, we run the programs that David mentioned. We administer the VW program in Ohio. We work very closely with our counterparts across the country. One of the things that's very impressive is how all the state agencies that are running these VW programs, everybody's like, whoa, this time we're going to talk to each other. We're going to listen and learn. And like Kenya said, just everybody pays attention to what someone else does. You read an RFA and you see some of your RFA in theirs in a different states, and some of the material that's in your RFA is actually borrowed from a different state. So I think across the country, states have been very cooperative about doing that. We work especially closely with our Region 5 counterparts like Sean Seals in Indiana, Debbie Swartz in Michigan, Rocky Sisk in Minnesota. Don't get to work as much with Kentucky, even though we're so close, we're neighbors, but I think just because it's Region 5 states and the Region 4 states that Kentucky's a part of, maybe that may be why, but certainly we participate in national calls with 30, 40 states participating in those as well. And it's like a little club. We ask our questions that we wouldn't ask publicly otherwise. What are you guys doing about this? So it's a great learning opportunity that we have. Real quick overview, as you all, many of you know already, Ohio's allocation of the VW settlement is $75 million. We were allowed a maximum of 15% to set aside for EV charging. That is exactly what we did. So that's $11.2 million total. We recently did a first round of level 2 charging grants. We made $3.25 million available. We released the RFA, early last summer. Through fall, gave people 3 months to apply. Most of the applications still came in on the last day, I will have you know. So human nature there. So for the 3.25 million that we made available, we got over 122 applications for projects in 22 of the 26 eligible counties. So we had 26 eligible counties in Ohio. 22, we had applications from 22 of them. Unfortunately, we didn't get any applications despite all of our outreach efforts from 4 counties out of the 26. The request for the 3.25, we got over $5.7 million in requests. Those totaled to about 236 locations. Over 860 charging ports were proposed in those applications. So then we did a completeness review, and we did an eligibility review first, and we did some completeness reviews. Some folks dropped out there. We did our detailed review. Some more folks did not respond to our questions adequately. So basically 10 or so applications dropped out then. And then the remaining, we ranked them based on 9 criterion. And those are in our RFA. I won't read those to you, but those range from, say, cost effectiveness of the proposal, how close is the next closest publicly available EV charging station, how much traffic is around, like what's your highest functional road class within a quarter of a mile of your proposed charger, some stuff, amenities, things like that. We had 9 criteria, and then we ranked all the applications based on that. We then divided them out between the counties because we had actually dedicated $115,000 per county at the first pass. We obviously split them out by counties. Some got funded, some didn't get funded based on the demand. As you can imagine, in some counties we had no applications, so that money moved to a different county. In some counties we had just enough, in some counties we have money left over, and we redistributed those accordingly, first within the same county and then generally according to the ranking. So it was really really great to have a single sheet that ranked every application from top to bottom. So in every, by the way, for every county, we limited a particular applicant to no more than 6 locations, because otherwise like one applicant would have been so cost effective that that's all we would be funding in that county. And no other applicant would receive any money. Though in the interest of some diversity of applicant and geographical spread as well, we limited it to no more than 6 locations per applicant per county. We obviously offered the funds to people. Sometimes life changes between when you applied and when you actually were told that you were awarded a grant. So a few people declined the grant, and some did it in part also because we had to limit. I can tell you in every Ohio county, like in all the 26 counties, we had to limit it to $30,000 per applicant because we got some huge requests, like $115,000 per grant request, because we did not put a cap on how much you could ask for, but then we capped it ourselves on how much we would offer you. So we capped everybody at $30,000. The big 6 counties, I can tell you which ones, so you can imagine which ones they are with the most demand in Ohio. We capped them at $22,500, and Cuyahoga County had so much demand that we had to cap them at $15,000 to try to get an even spread across our applicant base. So with all of that done, I'm happy to share with you that we allocated $3.24999 million, so $1 short of 3.25, to 178 locations in 22 counties, and we are hoping to see. Don't quote me on this because, well, we're being recorded, but we anticipate a little over 600 ports to be installed as a result of this effort. 600 publicly available level 2 charging ports across Ohio installed as a result of this effort. But the caveat or the disclaimer I'll offer you is that we haven't signed all the grant contracts yet. So a few folks could still drop out. We could still reallocate some money. That number could change a little bit. But we're really, as you can imagine, really, really excited about it. And we're really grateful, by the way. I mean, to all the communities, so many of you on this call today, to certainly our MPO partners. We have an amazing set of partners, OKI, MBRPC, NOACA. I mean, you all went above and beyond to TMACOG. I mean, you all went above and beyond. I mean, we would not have received the number of applications that we did had you all not done the groundwork. In some cases, like OKI, you help people prepare an application and submit it themselves. Some cases like MBRPC and NOACA, they actually submitted applications for some of their applicants, and that kind of created a little bit more work for us on the back end once they were selected for funding, but that's all okay. I mean, we appreciate that everybody did their part. Our partnerships with the MPOs in our state, we have some fantastic ones, and that really paid off in this regard. And some villages and some township offices that would otherwise never open up an email from Loudoun Loudoun opened it because they got it from David Shuey, right? And then because they have the familiarity with their local MPO, and we got their applications and we were able to fund them. So we're really, really grateful for that. We're happy with the results. As I mentioned, Nothing is easy. Kenya mentioned Lana working hard at getting contracts signed, but that's currently what my office is doing. We're kind of victims of our own success, if you will, but it's great for the state. We're so excited for the state to get these 600 ports, hopefully, fingers crossed, on the map over the next 24 months. I was asked to share some lessons learned. What did I learn from this DCFC RFA? Well, one thing I learned out of the level 2 RFAs, one thing I learned is no matter how many times I read it, invariably there will be something missing somewhere. So there were a few, there were a couple of places in the RFA where we could have done a better job in terms of our technical specifications for the chargers and so on. So we lived and learned. Most of the questions I got during the course of the application were things in the RFA already. So I found out that people don't read the RFA sometimes, the document itself. That is so near and dear to my heart because I spent days and weeks working on it. So we were thinking, and you all can chat it in if you want, but we were thinking next time we make the webinar that I do mandatory. Like once we release the RFA, we do 2 webinars, right? And we walk everybody through it and so on. And some grant programs, they make it mandatory that you can't apply if you don't attend the webinar. We think that's a little, I don't know, too command and control, and we didn't do it. But the lesson learned there was that a lot of the questions we got were from people that didn't come to the webinar. So interested to hear your thoughts in the chat box about that. We learned that ADA requirements are difficult, that it's a hard navigation for our local applicants about, local rules versus state level rules versus federal rules about ADA, but we're committed to making our chargers accessible to people with disabilities. So one of our requirements, if you don't know, is that one of the parking spaces and the equipment needed to be designed such that a person with a disability would be able to pull up and park and charge their car. If you had 15 chargers, or if you had 50, or if you had just one, we needed one parking space so that at least that would be available. So that's what we required. I also learned the hard way, the highest functional class road. We said, what's the highest functional class road within a quarter mile of you, right? And that was a mistake. I will accept it and take it because we thought we were doing the good deed, but we realized that sometimes people had a class D or something like that, within a quarter of a mile, but then a mile away, there was an interstate. And so we should have made it at least 1 mile in retrospect, so that would be a fair judgment of that location and how accessible it would be to Ohio citizens to easily access that. There were relative locations. We didn't ask our applicants to do that. We did it ourselves, where we went into publicly available mapping sites, and we try to identify who's the closest charger to where you're at. We honestly thought we would get 50 applications, right? We didn't think we would get 236. Good problem to have, great for the state, but we didn't realize that we were taking on all of that. So maybe next time we'll have the applicant do that work. It's always a trade-off. If you give the applicants, if you make it too complex for the applicants, then they're like, is it worth my applying for this grant for the amount of effort it takes? But then if you don't put it on the applicant, then you've got to do it yourself. And then you take that on. And then the applicants call you and say, hey, what happened to my application? It's been 2 months. Have you decided or not? Well, we're working on it. So it's kind of a trade-off. But either way, it's great for the state and it's a good thing. We also had some challenges between quotes versus the budget templates. Sometimes they wouldn't match because a vendor was providing a quote to an applicant, but the applicant was creating a template in their application. And so for the DCFC offering, we're debating whether we should just require that your selected vendor fill out that template so that the quote and budget template are not 2 different things, they're the same thing. So that's something, again, if you chat it in or let David know and he can let me know later. Really, really one of my biggest motivations for being here today is to A, share all this with you, but B, get your feedback on what your experience was. And what advice do you have for me for doing it better the next time? Because that's how we learn and that's how we best serve our state. That's the goal, is to make this money work the best way possible for the state of Ohio. So I'm all ears on any ideas that you have. So real quickly, coming up, we have 2 more funding opportunities coming. First up will be the electric school bus pilot. That is not from the $11.2 million. That's from the $45 million set aside for vehicles. Our plan calls for a $3 million pilot study and we want to fund at least 3 to 4 school districts, help them get electric school buses on board, help them with the charging infrastructure as well. There will be a cost share. I don't know, 80-20 maybe, but those things are not decided. And the technical specs as well are not decided. Again, I'll go back to Kenya. One of the beauties of going a little later than other people is you get to learn from what our neighboring states have done. I know Indiana has made an offering, Michigan has made an offering, Minnesota certainly has done it as well. So there's a lot there for us to look into, but that's the next, once I get all these people under contract and turn them over to my staff, then that's what will be number one on my plate. We would like to fund projects in Northern Ohio, Central Ohio, and Southern Ohio, if you will, because you all know, for those of you from Ohio, you know the 10-degree or 5-degree kind of change, or the level of snow you get in Northeast Ohio versus or Northwest Ohio versus what you get in Central and Southern Ohio. We would like to get some data that would allow us to give the state, not just us as state government, but give every one of you a good read on how electric school buses did in our state via this pilot study. So if you know people that are interested, please go ahead and have that conversation. You reach out to me, have them reach out to me. We are really interested, well, we're one of those states that we interact with our applicants before, during, after, on how best to make a program work for them. So we're really interested in hearing that. The other thing would be the DCFC offering. I know many of you are waiting on that. Many folks who missed the level 2 offering, despite the number of applications we got, I know are anxiously waiting for the DCFC offering. I can tell you we have somewhere between $5 to $8 million set aside for that. That depends on a couple of things we haven't decided yet. Well, that depends on the gaps that we identify. These are, again, level 2 was to meet local demand. If you have local demand in a reasonably busy area, then we're happy to fund you. And that's why we divided it out. And whether you were Ashtabula County or whether you were Hamilton County, you were both considered. But on DCFC, it'll be much more focused on our EV charging corridors, our designated EV charging corridors within a certain distance that hasn't been decided, quarter mile, half mile, 1 mile of a designated EV corridor. We'll have at least 5, maybe up to $8 million available, depending on the gaps that we identify. The dollars will also vary based on, we haven't decided whether we're going to allow up to like as low as 50 kilowatt chargers, or are we going to require 110? Are we going to require 150, 160? I think, as you all know, some of you know this better than I do, that the price associated with each charger kind of changes dramatically based on those criteria. And because those criteria are not set yet, we don't know how many dollars per charger we'll allocate. And because of that, we don't really know exactly how many dollars we'll make available. But certainly, if you're not already on our mailing list, please, reach out to David, reach out to me, and get on our mailing list. We really, really want you to be informed and engaged. And you can, by all means, shoot me an email and say, Alauddin, this is how I think you should set up the DCFC program. I promise you I will read it. I don't promise you that I'll do what you said, but I promise you that I will read it, and we will take every bit of advice that we can get. So with that, I'll turn it back to David and take any questions that you all may have. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Alauddin. We really appreciate your time today and appreciate the update, as we do from all 3 states. We have one other question here that came in the chat box. I'm not sure this is really directed towards any one of our first speakers yet or not, but I'll throw it out there in case anyone has experience with this. Has anyone explored community development block grant funding for level 2 infrastructure? I know we haven't. We have another source that I'm going to talk about here a little bit later today from additional federal funds that is available now. But I've not heard of anyone sort of chasing this source. So if anyone has, if you want to throw that in the chat box, and we can, we'll share that later, but we do appreciate that. So up next, our next speaker would be Bud Broughton, who's formerly of the City of Columbus. Bud is recently retired, and he's going to present on the efforts that the city is undertaking to advance EV adoption through the development of EV charging stations across the city, and specifically with the Smart Columbus effort. As I mentioned, Bud recently retired this year, where he was a senior project manager with the City of Columbus and licensed electrical engineer with the city's public service department. And there he led the Smart Columbus electrification program. Prior to his work on Smart Columbus, he led the planning, design, and construction of major downtown roadway projects for the city. He also spent 27 years with Conrail and CSX. Welcome, Bud.
Yeah, thank you, David. Can you see my screen okay?
We can, thank you.
Good. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to share, what's been going on with the city of Columbus here, specifically Smart Columbus program. Basically, back in 2016, some of you may have already heard that City of Columbus was named the Smart City Award. And as such, we had several priorities there based on this $10 million grant that we received as part of that from the Paul G. Allen Philanthropies. And so a part of this also, they wanted us to spend a good portion, actually over half the monies on consumer adoption and behavior and ride and drives and things like that. So they really wanted us to drill down on a lot of specifics that they could use. And so we looked at baseline information and things like that. We gathered information from then Polk, who had data on the shares of EVs versus normal ICE vehicles, combustion engines. And now we're getting it actually from ODOT and the BMV to keep things going on that. So the goal we set, looking at the baseline there of about 0.37% of new vehicles purchased in the Columbus region, Central Ohio region, 7-county region, those were EVs. And our goal was to get close to 2% on one of the quarters that we during our program, our 3-year program. So that 1.8%, what we wanted to do was kind of convert that into how much charging do we need? So going back and looking with various consultants, talking to our own Clean Cities organization, Clean Fuels Ohio, and then the Electrification Coalition, and then others, we did some studies and determined that to reach what we really wanted to do, to have adequate charging on multi-unit dwellings or MUDs, you would have 150 would be our goal that we'd want to set for charging. And then the public chargers ended up being 150 level 2, 75 DC fast charger. For our own public fleets, especially because City of Columbus was purchasing 200 EVs of our own, we put 300 out there because we had several other local partners, such as Ohio State University and others. And then as far as workplace charging, we have strong partnerships here through the Columbus Partnership. 70 local companies, CEOs were committed to this program as well. The CEO themselves even committed to purchase their own EVs. So we put 250 in there as far as chargers go for all that work that was going to take place. So with that priority 5 charging infrastructure, we wanted to drill down and study, exactly where are these chargers going to be? Because especially if we have private entities that want to put charging in, whether it be on private property or especially in the city right of way, where are the good places for these things? So we wanted to know that up front. So we used NRIX data actually to do a heat map for it. We also kind of cross-checked that with information that we had from our MPO, MORPC, Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, to find the trip origins. And then I mentioned also, as far as trip destinations go, that we wanted to find the data on by zip code level, which was scrubbed for personal information, where the EV owners live. So once we knew where they were coming from and where they were going to, and looking at, other than just that, we wanted to find out what the best locations were for charging, close to restaurants and malls and events and things like that. So we started mapping all this stuff via GIS and noted that, is more charging needed here. You can kind of see our flow chart that I'm following through here. Some things that were helping decide things. One important thing is power even available there. We had one primary location that we really wanted to put charging in next to our experience center that we opened, on the riverfront there. but we didn't have the charging in that location that we needed. The estimate was like $500,000 to put the underground infrastructure in. So that was a real challenge. So as you can see, that's definitely something you need to think about. So with all that, we were able to prioritize some locations. One of the other things we looked at was the downtown parking map. As you can see there, we show traffic volume from our data, and we included that on the map. So we printed the maps out. We looked at the hot spots, I'll call them, where actually people were traveling to. Anecdotally, we found everybody was pretty much just going to Walmart, but that's another topic there. And so you can see here, the folks looking at the maps, you have the two city people on the right there, the two utility people on the left, the consultants in the middle there kind of guiding us through this whole thing. And looking at local knowledge and then just the businesses that are there and things like that, you know, some of the locations were just that, businesses. So those are some of the businesses that we contacted and said, look, you have a lot of volume here. Here are some funding opportunities that are available either now, and we mentioned the Volkswagen settlement funds in the future at the time. So a lot of information just was being processed through this whole thing. And then from that, a lot of communications took place through our program. Just a little closer look at the map there, you can see some of the things we charted there. These circles, again, are just what we call nodes. Node 1 were the more hot spots. Node 2 would be, yeah, it's a hot spot, but not quite as much. And then you can see where the taxi waypoints were and things like that that we included on the map as well. Especially one important item was that we included the existing, and you can see in the upper left there on this particular map, there was an existing level 2 there close by, but nowhere near what we needed in the downtown area, which is this is a portion of. So again, the priorities were that we looked at was expected revenue and usage at the location, how much it would cost to install a charger there, really what level of need was there for the chargers, and then what partners are going to be involved. The City of Columbus, we really weren't interested in owning chargers, only in specific locations. We did do a pilot that I'll talk about here in a minute, but you know, we're really our thing is the partnership generation there. So that was something that was a major thought in our process. And then also just trip generators, how many people are actually visiting that location? Is it a huge event, kind of a once a week type thing, or is it a daily thing? A real important thing for us is that we wanted to get as much use out of that charger as possible. So, you know, during the day, maybe it could be workplace charging, and then during the evenings, more of a residential charging. So like I said, we wanted to do a pilot project. And in this situation here, looking at the south part of downtown, we have a $2 billion ODOT project that's still underway. And a segment of that, phase 2E is right in the middle here. I'm not sure if you can see, but there's a phase 2G that is completed. And the way ODOT's structuring this, the on and off ramps for the freeway is that you'll get on or you'll get in the downtown area from, in this case, the west side of downtown. You'll go through what's Fulton Street here, a one-way street, and then you'll get back on the freeway on the other end. And then there are German Village restaurants and things like that nearby, and other future plans that we have for this area to connect everything together. So this being one of the hot spots, you know, we knew that we would have the roadway open at this area. So while it was open, we worked with ODOT and we worked with the utility to get the underground infrastructure in place. So basically ODOT included that in their plans, and we were able to get the consultant to put all the conduits and everything to make things EV ready there. We've done that on a couple other locations in the downtown area too. We're finding that basically American Electric Power, the local utility company, installed the underground infrastructure at no cost to the city. And then ODOT, while they had the roadway open, they coordinated with the utilities company, and we were able to put all that in. So therefore, you know, as far as the city's project goes, we just really just paid for the charging infrastructure out of our grant funds. So again, this being the pilot project, we had 2 DC fast chargers that we put in there. They're both dual ports, so they'll serve either CHAdeMO or CCS charging. And then we put a RFP together, and then put the RFP out for 2 DC fast chargers at 50 kilowatts each. And then we all put other priorities in there for the city. The remote shut off is something the fire company wanted to see. And then we also developed a meter distribution panel that you can kind of see over there in the middle that American Electric Power was satisfied with. So a lot of engineering and development went through this whole thing. We also added artwork to it later on, which I think I'll be able to show you here. But just the results of the RFP, just so you can see, we had the lowest bidder was Green Spot Car Sharing Company. Their goal is to not just put in this location here now, but they on their own want to put in a few more locations that they're designing right now to where they can deploy EVs for car sharing. Then also we had ChargePoint bid on the project, and then Yellow Cab of Columbus. We made it a 3-year pilot. What we did find out was that vendors are really more interested in longer terms, more like 10-year terms. We weren't really comfortable with that. So now we've kind of settled into where we're really kind of trying to get things to be, 5 plus 5-year terms. But nevertheless, this pilot here is a 3-year pilot program. One other thing is that we're not really getting the traffic generation here as of yet, because ODOT has still got the road kind of tore up back here. So we don't see a whole lot of traffic through there yet, but they're going to open that road here in the next couple of months. So we look to get a lot of usage out of our chargers there. Again, emergency shutoff is another requirement. So, make sure as you design through this, you talk to all the other city agencies that might have an interest in the chargers. And then also, as part of another grant, Columbus College of Art and Design designed the artwork around the charger. So it's kind of cool to have something like that there as well. Again, back to the EV readiness. This is a location by the new soccer stadium. We were figuring that we'll be able to put this in while the roadways are being built, rather than wait and have somebody want to install a charger in the right of way later on down the line. So basically we have a simple diagram that we go by that just kind of lets the project managers understand, how to go about getting the design work in there for the conduit only for the EV charging stations. Something else that we just came out with on March 25th, if you just kind of Google the Columbus Public Service Design and Construction, and then go to the document library, you can see about a 12-page document that we put together that has all the specifications that we require as a city for chargers in the right of way. And then it also spells out a step-by-step guide. And we didn't really write any new guidance on this. We started to do that and then just realized that, the city already has documents in place when somebody wants to install something in the right of way, especially a utility. So we'll just show people the way it's done. We're kind of still piloting through this. Folks like Green Spot and Electrada and even Columbus Yellow Cab, they've got projects now that they're looking at putting in, and there's definitely communication going back and forth on any struggles that they may have. We want to try to smooth things out best possible, but this is the way that you go about it. You really start off talking to the Division of Parking and the Parking Services Assistant Director, and they help determine if that is or is not a good location based on parking needs, and then also based on the prior map that I showed you for planning and things like that. And then from there, it goes through what we call a 910 permit, which is just a utility permit to be out in the right of way. And then eventually, after they have their plans approved, they'll go to a construction permit, which we call a 903 excavation permit. And then the only other thing is we have a template agreement that they sign. And then once that's all worked through, then we can have our chargers in the right of way. So with all that, what are our next steps? Definitely want to coordinate with future incentive programs, especially the Volkswagen Settlement Fund. And we already have done that. We're 2 of the applicants there. locations, one being the new soccer stadium inside the parking garage there, and then also inside the Scioto Peninsula parking garage, which is major development that's taken place on the west bank of the river in downtown. So really, it was a good thing we were able to leverage work that we're doing there and get additional chargers in there. So appreciate really working with Loudon. They've been great on this. So we're looking forward to DC fast charging coming up next. And then also just want to analyze the charging behavior on not just the public charging that we have, but the ones that we installed in the multi-unit dwellings, and then our own several chargers that we installed at 20 different city locations. We've got an electric refuse truck pilot that we're going to be putting in place here toward the end of this year, and then build out the car sharing ports for several more charging stations throughout the city, and then also to expand deployment of EVs with Columbus Yellow Cab. They've been a great partner for us, and they've got very lofty goals. The owner of Columbus Yellow Cab wants to convert all of their approximately 200 EVs over to EVs, or I'm sorry, taxis over to EVs. So I think they've already got 10 Tesla Model 10s that they use and doing quite well with. So that's basically the program in a nutshell. Mandy Bishop is the one I'm speaking on behalf of today. She wanted me to share this with you. So her contact information is there. If you have any more questions about the Smart Columbus program in general, she's the program manager. So just get a hold of her email there. So thanks for.
Thank you, Bud. We appreciate your time today. And it's really great to hear all the wonderful things that are happening in Columbus in this space. I had a quick question for you. So the numbers that you showed for the install of those DC fast chargers, did that include the underground utility work, or was that separate?
That was separate. The underground utility work basically was about, I think, $120,000 for that work. But like I said, the utility company picked that up. Likewise, it's not being used yet, but on another adjacent roadway, we put 2 in for our own division of power, and it was about the same cost. It was about for 2 locations to feed about 1,000 feet from the source. It was about $110,000, $115,000 for that. So yes, that was separate. The DC fast charger costs were just to install the DC fast chargers, at the locations with the power supply system and the chargers themselves.
Gotcha. Thank you. And I'm assuming that the partnership with your energy provider there, which I'm assuming is AEP, was one that was pretty easy to work out. Was there anything special there that people need to know when approaching their local energy company for a project like this?
No, I think the key is that you know who there to talk to. Sometimes the engineer there on site's not necessarily the person to talk to. So they definitely, AP has people that are involved with trying to promote EV adoption. So those are the people you need to find. If AP are the people you're working with, you can just definitely contact either me or Mandy, and we can kind of get you in touch with AP folks. But yeah, just they were very, very cooperative. And they were actually, as far as the leverage of the funds for the grant, I think we're up to about $500 million now in leveraging, and AP is a big lion's share of all that. So yeah, definitely find the right people there.
That's great. Thank you again. Really appreciate your time today and the insights that you provided to our audience. Thank you.
Okay.
Finally, we have a presentation about the role of public-private partnerships can play in the development of EV charging stations. Our next speaker is Kevin Cushman, CEO of Electrata, and he will lead this portion of the program and introduce his panel of speakers. Kevin, take it away.
So thanks, David, very much. First off the top, wanted to thank Commissioner Painter for the wonderfully kind words about Electrata in the context of his overall very visionary viewpoint on electrification of transportation in our region, which is both very welcome and also on point relative to all the groundswell of activity going on in our part of the country an often overlooked part of the country relative to things like EVs, ZEV, and just clean transportation in general. So I'll applaud Commissioner Painter with great thanks to the OKI team, Mark, Robin, David. Been fantastic to work with since our inception over a year ago as a company. And then finally, this folks from every state, Carrie and Kenya and Aladdin, wonderfully setting up the environment for success, not just to provision the funds that come through opportunities like the VW settlement that come occasionally and intermittently, but also creating that networking capabilities. So groups like ours who are interested in finding ways to collaborate with member entities, municipals, counties, state governments have a way of connecting the dots, which is really critical, I think, because this solution will ultimately be borne out by a bunch of hybrid models. It won't be completed in one fashion or another. So we're proud to be part of this community and hopefully additive to the overall move forward for clean transportation. So Electrata, as many of you know, and great to see so many friendly names and faces in attendance, is an EV charging infrastructure company, a private entity founded here in Cincinnati. And our mission in life is to go out and deploy charging infrastructure and related energy systems to bring forward the ability to adopt electric vehicles across a multitude of use cases, from multi-unit dwellings to public destination charging to corporate workplace environments to fleet electrification, several of which those use cases apply to the members on the line today. Several of you have seen news and stories about our growth in the region, and we're very proud to have partnered with several of the folks on this slide, public and private implementations, and have just been so grateful for the embrace across the communities that we've been involved with to this point in deploying dozens of charging stations, which will exceed 300 by the end of 2021. As really a method of approaching this problem, we look at ourselves as what's demonstrated here at the bottom of this slide as the third leg of the stool, or third side of the triangle, as it were, in providing that EV infrastructure services gap filler, or that bridge between all of the vehicles that Commissioner Painter mentioned were coming online in the next 2, 3, 4 model years, up and down the vehicle class array, from heavy duty buses, delivery vehicles, trucks, all the way down to the light duty opportunities on the consumer end, and merging that with the use cases for those vehicles and trying to make it as seamless and frictionless an experience to bring charging to those use cases for those drivers, for those entities as possible, and to make that decision to convert to electric vehicles as simple as possible and as risk-free as possible. So that's really where we find ourselves and like to talk about bridging that gap is the reason why Electrata is here. So before I hand off to the real stars of this section of the conversation, Brian and Ron, I want to just tease up a few community considerations for those still considering how to think about EV charging infrastructure and how do I bring this forward with all the other things on my plate currently as a community leader. And I think it just goes through thinking through this as more of a multi-year strategy. It isn't necessarily about, hey, I should apply for this grant because it's there. It's can we come up alongside the vehicle availability, understand the use cases, create groups of stakeholders, and start having the conversation to think about this transition being not just a one-time event. It's a multi-year event. It should be considered something along the lines of a continuous commissioning project. So this is going to change over time. The capacity required to meet demand will change over time. The use for internal electrification will change and become more apparent over time as vehicles to fit the need and substitute for internal combustion engine vehicles become more apparent and readily substituted for those trucks and cars you use today. So thinking about these points, and I won't read every one of them, but I think it's important to call out forward-looking proactive embrace of clean transportation as an economic development tool. Thinking about clean transportation corridors, who should be involved in that conversation, because the use cases within and around a community are important to map out, just as Bud visualized with the way they took a very analytics heavy view to public charging and locations within Columbus. I think it's also important to talk about electrification as being an ROI-based decision. It's no longer just about putting a green face on the community, talking about being forward-looking or technology friendly. It's really about how does this change the traffic pattern? How does it change environmental quality? And most importantly, thinking forward about fleets and how to team up to deploy fleets for your community. It's about how do I create cost savings and visibility to cost savings at the same time you're changing your fleet over to a cleaner, more sustainable operation. And to know finally that both utilities are helping to set the framework for this to continue to improve, but also that entities like Electrata are here with capital to remove that burden from the process of going beyond the pilot and going into things that are more commercial scale for your community. So two quick points on fleet. One is, if you think about fleet as kind of the longer term ROI driven implementation of EV charging in your community, there's a lot to cover. And one of the reasons that we spend a lot of time with fleets and fleet owners is that there are several points to consider when you're thinking about taking a fleet of 10 or 15 or 30 or 50 vehicles to electric over time. It's not just, hey, where do I put the chargers and I hope I can get a vehicle that's pretty cheap. It's really thinking through the energy profile of what you'll be doing. How does the depot where the fleet vehicle reside set up for electrification versus petroleum fueled operation? And what do we do and how do we work with the team that manages the fleet so that they can make that pivot and start working with electric vehicles over time as well? So our goal in collaboration with municipals and counties on fleet is to take a look at each one of the components, each bubble on this slide, as it were, and create a comprehensive strategy. Again, not as a one-time event, but as a continuous process. And then finally, from David's perspective and what we've been very successful to this point, and with a lot of help from our partners, both public and private, is to construct a PPP in the traditional sense, public-private partnership approach to our public partners that encourages collaboration. And what it does is allows the public partner to work with us in co-authoring a strategy for electrification over multiple use cases. Again, public-facing, direct current fast charging, level 2 charging for parking areas, but also thinking about internal and fleet uses. And teaming up with a partner like Electrata, who can bring capital, who can bring analytics, and who can essentially frame up a long-term partnership relationship, take advantage of utility rebates and incentives, tax rebates and incentives that may not be available to the municipal entity, and build into that any future planning or energy opportunities into a cohesive relationship that we're not in a hurry to get completed, that should stand the test of time, and it should also be backed by a service level type of an agreement where reliability is built into the relationship and accountability and local service is built into the relationship. So we present that as an alternative to the traditional procurement, acquire, build, and then hope for the best approach that sometimes has illustrated the last few years of implementations on EV charging. So things to think about. Of course, we're available at any time for any member. I'd love to start the conversation. I think my colleague Irina may have put our email in the chat, partners@electrata.com for future conversations. So thrilled to pick up the baton and go forward with anyone on the phone. Without any further ado, however, I will introduce a couple of our partners, Brian and Ron. First, Brian Riblett from Montgomery, who we've teamed up with on multiple sites in the city to carry forward their strategy for electrification.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me today, and appreciate everything that OKI and everybody else has done to advance this initiative with EV. And I just want to touch briefly on our experience with the city of Montgomery and working with Electrata. And I just like to sum it up by saying it's for us, it's a turnkey solution. It really simplified our process. We're a fairly lean staff here at the city of Montgomery. So what really began as a couple of conversations with Kevin and his team, led me to having a discussion with our Environmental Advisory Commission on 2 occasions in 2020, in May and June. And then we followed that up with a letter of support to Electrata to pursue the funding that they have been actively working on. So I really just want to stress the ease of working with Electrata again, and Kevin and his team, and they came out and worked with us to identify several locations to install level 2 charging units for our parking facilities within our city hall area, our downtown parking area. And then we're a little unique. We have a large development. Some of you may heard of the Montgomery Quarter at the interchange of Ronald Reagan and Montgomery Road. So we have two large parking facilities that are being constructed there. And so the timing was perfect to work. That's just another example of working together collaboratively with Electrata, with the city, with the development team, with the port, and to get this infrastructure put in while these garages are being constructed. So we have 16 level 2 units that are going in our parking garages at the Montgomery Quarter. And we also have a parking garage at our north location of our city at our Vintage Club Christ Hospital facility with a large parking garage that we were able to identify and take advantage of that to install these level 2 charging stations that we're working with Electrata on. Again, I just want to really tout the ease of working with Kevin and his team. And we were able to knock out a license agreement and release to work with them. And to his point, it just takes away all of the liability, takes away the procurement process, and it really simplified an initiative that we feel is important here in Montgomery. And with that, I think that's all I have. I just am here to really support this effort, and thanks to everybody for your interest in this as well. And I would be happy to answer any questions and help others through that process.
Thanks, Brian. David, I think you and I may have been saying the same thing coming up about Ron.
Yeah, I don't see him on the list, so he might have dropped off. I'm not sure, but he's not here right now.
That's okay. I think he may have a technical issue or something. So in real briefly, I realize we're close to time for our allotment, but North College Hill is another partner of ours with a slightly different use case. Actually, North College Hill was looking to deploy EV charging as a way to bring the technology into the community. If you look at a map of penetration where EVs have been purchased over the past few years, you'll notice that there's a significant penetration in the I-71 corridor in this part of the state. North College Hill is an area that you almost would call a charging desert, to coin a term. Ron was very forthright in terms of his need and desire to see technology brought to North College Hill to indicate to the business owners, the community at large, that this is not technology that's going to be showing up in 5 years. This is technology that will be adopted across every community in our region based on a desire to see transportation and clean transportation opportunities really widely available. So the stakeholder group that Ron has assembled in North College Hill is fantastic. And I think Ron views this as a step forward in saying, we can, we're demonstrating that we can team up, bring this forward and provide this as a service to help spur adoption of EVs within his community in North College Hill. So similar to Brian's process, as far as just looking at the best way to team up through an agreement, Ron did the same thing, curated the process. We teamed up and worked through their individual city approval process, and were successful in deploying chargers in their city center location, the community center, which has been fantastic. And OKI was very instrumental in bringing that forward as well. So a lot of models for the public-private partnership approach. Even including what we found out today, Hamilton County it will be working with Electrata for its public sites through a relationship that's very similar, a public-private partnership arrangement where we own and operate the equipment at Hamilton County garages to bring charging to those locations as well. So it's just all about the evaluation process and our partners at the municipalities coaching us as to how best to proceed, and we filling in the gaps and being flexible as a partner. So I'll leave it at that. Of course, we're wide open for future follow-ups and conversations with anyone on the line. And David, thank you again for including us in today's session.
You bet. Thank you so much, Kevin. We appreciate your time, and Brian as well. It's really great to know that we have a local company here, a great local company like Electrata, that is available for communities who either don't want to or don't have the capacity to take on EV charging by themselves. So we think it always provides a nice option for our communities, and which is why we include Electrata. So again, thank you, Kevin. So I know we're just about out of time, but I do have one final note that I wanted to end on here before we close things out. OKI received guidance last week from the Federal Highway Administration regarding the president's goal of installing 500,000 new EV chargers by 2030 and funding that's available today to help meet this goal. So what was highlighted to us in this early guidance was that two of our programs that we administer here locally, the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, or STPG, and the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program are both have eligible pools of funding for such EV infrastructure. So the first would be STPG. It's an eligible source for construction and installation of EV charging infrastructure, including parking facilities and utilities. And then also the installation of EV charging infrastructure as part of a transit capital project request eligible under Chapter 53 of Title 49 of the United States Code. While CMAQ funding is available in addition to the previously mentioned projects for EV acquisition and engine conversions and construction and installation of EV charging infrastructure to support operational resiliency, national energy security, environmental and community goals for freight transportation. OKI has a current call for projects for both of these funding sources. You can find details at funding.oki.org or reach out to Andy Reeser on our staff at areeser@oki.org. That's ARESER@oki.org. Again, these are both open, and I believe the closing date on these funding opportunities is early June. So there's still time to get funding requests in. And again, Andy can provide you with some of the guidance. There's obviously restrictions on use and where these can be put and where they can't be put, but he can provide all of that for you. So just wanted to make you aware of those two funding opportunities while we were on today. So once again, I'd like to thank our presenters for their participation today and helping make this a successful event. I think lots of good information was shared, and I feel like that this is probably just the first step in many for us in rolling out EV chargers across the OKI region. With that, thanks everyone for your attendance today, and hopefully we'll see you all soon. Have a great day.